Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Great, awesome. Sorry about that. Always have a little bit of a technical drama, don't we, on these live streams. Welcome to this live stream, community hangout, Q&A. Really grateful for all of you watching right now. Thanks for your patience. This is the 4th week I've done this in a row now, so maybe we should make it a regular Sunday night thing, especially during this lockdown that most of us are going through. I hope everyone is healthy and happy, more importantly. So healthy in terms of physical health and then happy in terms of their mental health. Let's start off with this. This beautiful Awase Styroline 85. I aquascaped this 2 weeks ago. There is a full video on this on my channel, so please check that out if you've not seen it yet. Really happy with this. Low tech, standard lights that come supplied with the aquarium, standard internal filter, all easy plants, Tropica substrate, the soil, standard Iwagumi layout. Really happy with it. Can't wait to see this one grow in. Let me know in the comments what sort of fish you'd like to see in here. I've got a few ideas, but always happy to hear your thoughts as well, of course. So guys, let's have a look through the... Oh, Candy has kindly supplied the link already. What a legend. Thank you, Candy. Lizzie's here as well. Hi, Lizzie. Hopefully Radu's with us as well. Thanks, shout out to my mod team. Really appreciate your hard work. Ember Tetras, that's a great shout for fish for in here. Yeah, it's quite a tall tank, isn't it? It's quite sort of the aspect ratio is relatively tall to its length, so I think it will suit something a little bit taller. I really like Pentazona barbs, but they tend to be quite shy, so they might not be the best choice. But Ember Tetras, they are small, but they actually are quite a tall bodied tetra in terms of their length versus the width, so they might be a good shout. And it'd be nice to add a bit of orange in here. We've got red from the cherry shrimp. They'll probably breed quite well in here, I would suggest. I have hard tap water, which they seem to love. These are actually taken out of my Aquascape of 1200, hundreds of shrimp in there. And I've actually put half a dozen or so in my Fluval Flex as well, so we can get some more colonies of shrimp growing, which is awesome. Okay, earlier today, when I announced the live stream, I did post on some Facebook groups. Some of you may be members of these Facebook groups already, and I announced the live stream, supplied a link. So shout out to everyone that's come here from Facebook. And I also offered the opportunity to ask some questions on the Facebook groups. And I've picked out 3 really great questions. So I'm going to start off with those to get the ball rolling. And if you want to ask your own questions, then do so in the live chat. And then what I'll do, I'll keep a special eye on the super chats, and this will give you much more of a chance of getting your question answered, just because it highlights it and it enables me to see it much more easily. So if the mod team can just keep an eye on the super chats as well if I've forgotten to mention anyone. Okay, so let's go over to these questions from Facebook. I'm hoping that they are, there they are. Okay, so Chris Simmons, if you're watching, thanks very much for your in-depth question. Chris asks, he says he has a new 180 litre tank, which for our American friends is about 55 gallons. I'm planning soil at the back and sand at the front, similar to the tank that I set up with Peter at Riverwood Aquatics. He has mini landscape rock to run across the tank with some wood too. I've ordered 2 of each of the attached plants. So he's got Tropica 1-2 Grow, Cryptocorini undulatus red, Tropica 1-2 Grow, Staragini repens, the Tropica 1-2 Grow, Lilioptis brasiliensis, and the Tropica 1-2 Grow Java Mus, basically. So he's asking where would each of them be best suited, and should he plant into the sand or the soil? Okay, that's a great question, quite in depth, but let's talk about that. So the 4 plants that I've listed, you've got Crypt undulatus, Staragini, Liliopsis, and Java Moss. I would definitely attach the Java Moss to the wood, and I would plant the Liliopsis in the foreground. You said you've got sand foreground, and you're asking actually, should you plant into the soil or the sand? The plants will definitely do better in the soil, but Liliopsis is a very short plant, so it depends on the style of the aquascape. I would probably plant it into the soil maybe, and then have open sand in front of that. the Staragini I'd plant behind the Liliopsis to give a transitional effect. So you've got the low Liliopsis and then you have the Staragini above that. And then finally I would put the Cryptocoraini undulatus in the background. That actually has the potential to grow relatively tall, so that would make a nice background plant. I'd actually consider also adding some more stem plants in the back, just to add some fast growers, some helping plants to help prevent algae, which is really common in these early stages. Okay, let me just go back to the stream, make sure everything's working. Yeah, all good. So let's go back to another question. So thanks for that question, Chris. And they don't seem to have attached themselves. There we go. Amateur Aquatics, fellow UK YouTuber. He says, what are my best top 3 stem plants in terms of colour, giving that pop effect? So one of my favourites of all time at the moment especially is the Limnophila hyperoides. Some of you may have seen this in my Aquascape 1200. Under good lighting and good nutrition, you'll get a real bold pinky purple or red coloration, which is very, very high impact. And it's an easy plant as well. So it'll potentially grow in a non-CO2 injected setup, doesn't need too much light. But the more light you give it and the more CO2 and nutrition, the better it will grow and the more colour you'll get. So that's probably one of my favourites. Also like Rotana H4r. Again, this is a relatively easy plant, but to get the best colour, you really do need strong lighting. It's very similar to Rotala rotundifolia in terms of its texture and leaf shape, but it has the potential to go a much deeper red colour, especially in the good lighting. And then my other favourites in terms of colour, giving that pop effect, stem plants, another colourful. I'll tell you what I really like recently is the Rotala wallachii. Now, actually, I've never grown this myself yet, but it's a very fine needle leaf shape, leaf form, very fine texture, quite small in terms of the circumference of the plant. But under good light again, it will turn a really nice red colour. And it's a really kind of, because of the density of the needle leaves, it gives a real kind of lush, fine textured appearance. So those are my top 3. Thanks for your question. Amateur Aquatics, that's Peter. Brett Greenwood, can I talk about floating plants that could be used in a low-tech 10-gallon, battling with a little green string algae and have been contemplating adding floating plants? First of all, floating plants are a great idea to help combat algae. They help to block the lighting, which is normally, sometimes too much lighting is a cause of algae. And also floating plants have much more access to CO2 in the air. So even if you're not injecting CO2 in the aquarium, they'll benefit because they'll get CO2 from the air because they're floating. And also because they're floating, they're the nearest the light. So they tend to grow very, very fast because they have more light, more CO2. The roots that grow into the water, these produce oxygen. So they're just a really great thing for most aquariums. In terms of species suitable for a 10-gallon, I mean, 10 gallons for our UK friends is 38 litres. It's a relatively small aquarium. So you want to go for a small kind of floating plant, something like Salvinia auriculata, which is the leaf size is only 1/4 of an inch or less than a centimetre, and they have quite small roots that don't dangle down too much. So this is a good example. This is a good potential floating plant. You could also consider Amazon frogbit, Limnobium laevigatum. This has the potential to have really long roots, and the leaves can grow up to sort of an inch in diameter, depending on the lighting. These are great, especially if you want to create quite a kind of cryptic style aquarium with the roots dangling down. This provides lots of shelter and security for the fish. So it depends on the aesthetic that you want to create with the aquascape. If you don't mind these long dangling white roots coming down into the aquarium, then this is a good example of what you could go for. So a couple of ideas there. Salvinia auriculata, which is the smallest, and then you've got the bigger Amazon frogbit. But both good options, and both I'm sure would grow well in a low-tech 10-gallon. Thanks for your question, Brett. Okay, so let's have a look at, so we've got some super chats. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's jump over to those first. Thanks, G. Shrimperlink says, have you ever scaped a corner aquarium? What are the issues you expect due to the shape? Head up the A15 if you fancy a challenge. Well, maybe one day, but not at the moment, eh? But thanks for the super chat, mate. I have aquascaped 2 or 3 corner aquariums in my time. Never actually owned one myself, but I've done a couple for a couple of clients. And the trick is just to use the space the best you can. With a corner aquarium, the vast majority have the biggest kind of open pane of glass towards you, and then it disappears into the corner, of course. So just bear in mind your kind of regular aquascaping techniques, you know, foreground, mid-ground, background. But obviously your background is becoming narrower and narrower as it converges into the corner of your room or the corner of the aquarium. So just bear that in mind. And you need to bear in mind things like circulation as well, because a corner aquarium, the design of it, you can have some different challenges when it comes to circulating the water. So bear that in mind. But just stick to the regular, you know, background plants, mid-ground plants, foreground plants, and then in my personal opinion, my taste, I like to use lots of bold hardscape and then use lots of epiphyte plants attached to the hardscape to give you a focal point, to give you a sense of kind of maturity to the aquascape. And then you'd really have to choose your foreground plants appropriately, because you've got such a large viewing area for the foreground, because it is the largest kind of space. So you might want to mix species up rather than having a uniform pattern of one carpeting species. You may want to mix up some species. That can look really natural. And that, yeah, just go from there really. But use the kind of commonly known aquascaping principles that I discuss in a lot of my videos to help you out. If you go, I don't know if there's any good results on Google search for Googling corner aquarium aquascapes, you might get some inspiration from there as well. We have another super chat from Josh Newton. Thank you, Josh. Fluval 206, enough filtration for my Lido 120. A Lido 120, I think you mean the dual Lido 120, which is a similar kind of looking tank to this actually. It's a bit bigger in terms of volume. It's a 120, it's 120 litres, which is about 30 gallons. The 206, I can't remember the flow rate of that, but you want to be aiming for around between 5 and 10 times the tank turnover. So 120 litres times 5 is 600. So as long as the filter is rated at least 600 litres per hour, then that is probably okay. I would potentially go for one above that, so maybe the 306 if you have that possibility, if you've not bought the 206 already and you can stretch your budget a little bit. I actually prefer, I mean, Fluval are a good brand, well-known brand and reliable brand, but I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about my favourite filters, which are Waze, the Biomaster Thermo, which have the built-in heater and pre-filter, which makes maintenance much more simple versus the Fluval. And with that built-in heater as well, you don't have to have a heater in your aquarium, so it removes that from the aquascape, which, you know, no one likes to see ugly heaters in their tanks, do they really? So hopefully that answers your question. Josh, thanks again for the super chat. Oh, we've got another one. Camilla Asmussen, and she's given 17 Danish kroner. Thank you so much, Camilla. Is a Waze Filto Smart 200 too powerful for the 30 litre? It is quite a powerful filter for a 30 litre. It would depend on the livestock you want to keep. If you want to keep kind of fish that don't like a lot of flow, like a betta or fish with large fins, then I would have probably go for something a bit less powerful. Another option is actually to fit either a spray bar, so you get the water isn't so turbulent from one direction, or what I've done before in an Aquascape 300, which is 30 litres or so, I've used a spin outlet, which is a glass outlet, which has quite a unique kind of design. Basically, it distributes the water really evenly, so you can actually pump a lot of water through it, but it doesn't create too much turbulence around the water column. So that's something that you can consider as well. Or you could just go down to the 100 model. Josh ATX, we've got another super chat. Thank you so much, Josh. Really appreciate it. I think you've given me super chats before, Josh, so thank you so much for your generosity. Why hasn't aquascaping taken off in the US like it has in Europe? I want a style line, but I can't get one in the US. Well, that's a shame. I'm sure they will be available at some point. And I would argue that it is taken off to an extent. There are kind of small pockets of aquascapers, especially in the Chicago area. You also have over in the west, so Houston area, you've got some aquascapers, especially with the inspirational guys from Aquarium Design Group down in Texas there. And you also have the Aquascapers Collective, which are a great group of guys that are super passionate about aquascaping. I believe they've got a couple of Facebook groups as well that you can join. So they've got one sort of tailored at beginners that are just starting their journey on aquascaping, and then they've got like a much more kind of specific group for experienced aquascapers. So search for them, the Aquascapers Collective. I think they're the Aquascapers Collective. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, or TAC. You've got guys like Hiep Hong, Sean McBride. Oh, my mind's gone blank because I'm under pressure. John Peeney. Oh God, who's the other guy? The really super talented. Oh, he's going to kill me for not remembering his name. It will come to me later. I think he works at ADG right now. But they're all super talented scapers, and if you get involved with those guys, then these will help you on your aquascaping journey for sure. But I think the hobby in general in the States is so kind of diverse. So aquascaping is obviously one kind of segment of the aquarium hobby. So that might be why it's perceived as only it's not so popular in Europe. Europe have a lot more aquascaping specialist stores, I would say. So Europe is, formed of, about 30 or 40 different countries, and maybe you have, a dozen, 12 or 15 of those countries each have a couple of really high-end specialist stores. So you have that kind of richness of diversity in Europe versus the States. The States is one country, so there might be a kind of political, geographical element there to why aquascaping hasn't taken off so much. But it's definitely increasing in popularity. And yeah, going back to the original kind of recommendation of checking out the Aquascapers Collective. Hopefully someone can leave a link maybe to their Facebook group or their website. Okay, we've got another super chat. Thank you so much from VDB. That's a cool name. $4.99. Hi, if I wanted to add Tropica soil to an established but tired gravel tank, do I need to remove fish, or can I add it with them in? I would personally remove them if possible. The risk with any kind of aqua soil, Tropica soil or ADA aqua soil, is that it can leach ammonia. And although you might have an established filter and an established substrate already, there could be a risk of an ammonia spike, and this is obviously going to potentially cause issues for your livestock, whether it's fish or shrimp. So if you have the possibility to, then rehome your livestock temporarily in a quarantine tank or a large bucket. Put your filter in that separate tank with a heater as well. And actually, I would personally, this is my own personal preference, I would use this opportunity to completely rescape your tank if you have the budget to. So you've obviously invested already in the Tropica soil. You say you've got a tired gravel. It's not normally, I wouldn't normally recommend mixing a gravel and a soil together. They tend to kind of, the soil is lighter than the gravel, so it will kind of raise to the top. And then you have the gravel, which potentially it's going to go even more kind of stale maybe. So I would actually use the opportunity to completely rescape the tank. And if you can afford it, just completely cover it with the Tropica soil, and then focus on creating a lovely new layout. You maybe invest in some new hardscape if you can afford it, invest in some new plants if you can afford them, and use this opportunity while you've taken that first step to invest in a decent substrate system. Why not take it to the next level and then create something really beautiful that you can plan, take your time, and then really enjoy, you know, something fresh and exciting. If that is not an option and you're on a tight budget, then just stick with the original recommendation of taking out your livestock, putting them temporarily in a holding tank. Then you fit your Tropica soil. I'll probably just put it on top of your gravel. It's going to raise to the top anyway, and then replant, redo your hardscape, and then I would actually do a huge water change straight away, and then keep your fish running in that separate tank for at least a few days, and then do big water changes every day, test for ammonia, and then once you've got absolutely zero chance of having any ammonia, then you can put your livestock back in. Hopefully that will make sense to you. It's quite a big job installing a new substrate in an aquarium, as you could probably tell. Okay, let's have a look at some other questions. Scott Hilton, hi George, getting a Biomaster 600 Thermo for my Aquascape at 1500, good choice. Do you change anything in your Biomaster or do you leave it as standard? That's a really great question. I actually just leave it absolutely standard. The Awase are well known for their filtration products from ponds. They're very experienced in this world, in this industry, and the supplied media is actually very good in the Biomasters. If you have if your tank is going to be heavily planted, which I suspect it will be, if you're going down an Aquascape of 1500 route, I guess you've obviously invested in a really nice quality aquarium, and I'm hoping you're going to invest equally in good quality plants, etc. Then actually the more plants you have and the healthier those plants are, actually the less important your biological media, your filter media becomes in your filter, because the healthy plant growth is actually dealing with so much of that waste anyway. I would consider maybe adding another filter though. For an Aquascape of 1500, this is about 500 litres or 125 US gallons. One filter is potentially going to struggle to create enough circulation. I was using two 600s in my Aquascape of 1200, so I think if you can afford it, go for another filter if I would, and then if you could, and then put one on one end, one on the other, and then put the inlet and outlet kind of diametrically opposed to one another. So this is you have the outlet here, and then on the other side you have the outlet on the other side, and vice versa with the inlets. And then this is going to create a gyre effect and get you really ideal circulation. The potential with having just the one filter is that you're not going to get enough circulation, especially in that far end, maybe down in the bottom right or the bottom left. You could potentially end up with some circulation dead spots, and this can lead to poor plant growth and consequent algae issues potentially. We've got another super chat there flying in thick and fast. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. Dean Truebody, do I get overrun with people asking you to do private installations? What could the difference make if someone was serious? I don't get overrun with it because I don't actually advertise the fact that I do private installs. I get a few inquiries, and I'll just let them know what my fee is, and then an overall kind of potential cost that a whole system is going to be, and then that's a very, very quick way of determining whether they're serious or not, because either they don't reply to me or they're very interested, and we set up a conference call and we discuss options, etc. So it's quite a simple process. I give them a ballpark figure of what they can expect to pay. I typically install Aquascape 600s or 900s for clients. This is a really popular size aquarium and a brand. I source everything for them, all the aquarium equipment, all the plants, the hardscape. They give me some ideas of what aquascape they want to create, and we discuss different ideas, bounce ideas off each other, and then I get all the materials, go to their house or their home or their office, and then set it up for them. And yeah, I mean, a lot of you have seen the videos of this kind of process already, so it's really cool. But I don't actually advertise it at the moment. I never have really advertised private installs. It's just something, if someone's got enough motivation, they'll get hold of me via my Instagram. There's an email button on there which people can use to inquire. Yeah, so they'll just inquire from there. Thank you for the super chat, Dean, appreciate it. George Duke Cohan, I do apologise. I think I've missed your super chat. Oh, here we go. Sorry, George. Thank you very much for the super chat. We've got another one. Mark. Well, I've got quite a few actually. Not coming up at the top of the thing. I do apologise. I've got loads to go through. Question from George Duke Cohan, as a cool name. Why don't you do a live food tank setup? Also, is there an email I can contact you on? Well, I might as well say it, my email, because it is available on Instagram and anyone can use it. So if you, probably the best one to use is gfaquascapes@gmail.com. So that's gfaquascapes@gmail.com. You can contact me there. Thank you for the super chat. Mark Dorr, 199 super chat. Hi mate, do you think pineapple belongs on pizza? Absolutely. I love a Hawaiian pizza. Ben Power, shout out to Ben again. Ben does my animations. So, you know, that really cool black and white sequence that you see at the beginning of all my videos with the fish swimming through the aquascape and then finally the sponsor logos. That's all Ben's work. So, and he's a really cool guy. I haven't met him yet. We speak on the phone a lot, but yeah, super cool guy. And thank you for the super chat, Ben. Don't know why you're super chatting me. You don't need to give me any money. Evening, George. What's the best way to remove and replace plants from an existing scape? Trim and leave the roots. Concerned about disturbing the substrate. It's a great question. I would actually remove the whole plant with the roots, and then just do a huge water change afterwards. Or what you can do is start running a siphon whilst you pull the plant out. So as you're pulling the roots out, it's disturbing all the substrate, but you've got the siphon running. Maybe get your other half to help you with the siphoning as you're pulling the plants out. The potential issue with just cutting the plant off and letting the roots kind of decompose in the soil is it can produce a lot of organic waste, and depending on your plant mass and the whole system, that organic waste can build up, accumulate, and potentially lead to algae issues. So my personal preference is to keep the aquarium almost as clean as you can and remove those roots if possible. Hopefully that makes sense. Steve, Killing Back Music. Thank you so much, Steve. Hope you're well, mate. Hi, George. Just a tip for you to say thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Steve's a really great guy. I know Steve from the Norwich area. We met in Scape Nature. Really, really cool aquarium store. Sort of nature store. It does all kind of nature stuff. Aquascaping, terrariums, etc. Paul Cahill. Thank you so much for the super chat. Hi G, do you purposely introduce snails and type? Yes, in fact in all my aquascapes right now I have nearite snails. So these are really great at eating algae, especially off rocks, and I like to use them in pretty much all my aquascapes now. The only disadvantage is that they can lay eggs, which are quite stubborn on the hardscape, which can just like little white dots that, yeah, like I say, they're just really sticky. But they're better than seeing algae on the rocks in my opinion. So I like to use the nearite snails. Okay, I think we're good for the super chats now. I don't think I've missed anyone out. Thank you so much, everyone. Remco, hi George. Do you think the EAPLC 2020 contest will take place later this year? I think so. I don't want to definitely say yes or no, but I think so. You could try contacting Yuri's, try DMing on Instagram. He should be able to give you some more information. You're welcome, Paul. MH Aquatics. Can you talk about prospective aquascaping, as I have struggled with this? I don't really understand this question, what you mean by prospective aquascaping. Can you just clarify what you mean, or someone else clarify? I'm not sure what that means. I'll try to answer it if I can. David, do you recommend the Oise Biomaster 250 into a 63 litre aquarium? Yes, that's probably a good size. Maybe even the 350 if you want a little bit more circulation. We've got another super chat. I will try to answer as many questions as I can, but it just makes sense for me to answer the super chats first. If people, you know, are spending their hard-earned money on receiving some advice. James Dyer, thank you, mate. I've rescaped my tank, including my existing plants and substrate. Do I need to treat it as a new tank, e.g. daily water changes? I would, personally. I mean, your filter may be mature, but better safe than sorry. The more water changes you can do and the bigger those water changes, especially at the beginning, the more likely success you're going to get, the less likely algae you're going to get. So if you have the time, then definitely consider the daily water changes, at least every other day, at least 50%. Yeah, so you know the score, mate. But yeah, more the merrier in general. Robert Ging, thank you, mate, for the super chat, $5. I added amano shrimp and Harlequin rasboras to my freshly water changed ADA 60p. All 6 shrimp died, and only one in one day, and rasboras are all fine. Any ideas? Okay, I'm sorry. First of all, sorry to hear about your shrimp dying. That's really sad to hear. Shrimp are usually a lot more sensitive than fish, especially to sudden changing water parameters. So I'm guessing the water change would have caused some sort of water chemistry fluctuation, which may have been lethal for the shrimp. There's other things to consider with invertebrates in general. They are super sensitive to any kind of insecticides, any pesticides, any kind of aerosols in the air, any air fresheners. If you've been sanitizing your hands excessively, especially in the environment that we're living in right now, any kind of soap that's on your hands and then you go into the aquarium, this unfortunately may have caused them to suffer. So try not to be too despondent. Thankfully, that sounds like your fish are okay. But just learn from this experience. Be super careful with putting anything into the aquarium, including new fresh water. Hopefully it won't happen again. I'm sorry for your loss, Robert. Thank you for the super chat. Corey Leitner, do I use a water conditioner and what brand? Hi Corey. Yes, I use Fritz Aquatics ACCER, which is a dry powder. It's a dechlorinator, but it also gets rid of ammonia, chloramine, chlorine, and I think that's it. Yeah, and I really like it because it's really concentrated. It's a dry powder. It's not like pre-mixed with a liquid. So in a small kind of tub, you can treat thousands of litres, if not gallons, with it. So I just put I normally change, let's talk about the Oase Highline 175. I do a 75% water change in there, which is about 30 or 40 US gallons. And I simply put in a level teaspoon of the dry powder in, and that dechlorinates the whole lot in one go. That's a great question. Tudor Williams, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. Have you ever encountered diatoms and how did I get rid of them if I have? Yes, absolutely. Diatoms are really common in new setups and I have suffered with them before. I think the last time I got them was on my Aquascape 1200, probably about 6 months or so ago. And this was a result of a combination of things. So not enough healthy plant growth and not enough water changes in the early stages. And the consequence of this was the diatoms. Thankfully, diatoms are quite easy to get rid of algae, and it tends to kind of just go away on its own after a while. If you just keep up your water changes, keep focusing on your healthy plant growth, and then your diatoms will go away. If you're in a position to, Otocinclus are great at eating diatoms, maybe even amano shrimp. Obviously, make sure the aquarium is big enough, the right kind of aquarium to stock these things. Otocinclus actually are a shoaling fish. A lot of people tend to keep them in really small nanos, but actually, because they are a shoaling fish, you want to keep them in at least a group of 6. So consider that before you buy any Otocinclus for your diatoms. MH Aquatics, can I talk about making a focal point that makes it look like the scape never ends? I've struggled with this. So you're talking about, perspective aquascaping, I think you mean, but instead of perspective. So that's a great question, MH Aquatics. This is more common in kind of diorama style aquascaping. So this is a style of aquascaping which is actually directly copying a landscape or a terrestrial scene and putting them into the aquarium. And common techniques to get this kind of vanishing, what we call a vanishing point, an infinite vanishing point, is to just use some kind of optical illusion effects. So what you can use is broader texture plants at the front of the aquarium and then going into finer texture plants at the back. So a good example might be using Glossostigma in the foreground and then leading up to maybe Hemianthus cuba in the background. And this forces your perspective to actually think that the tank is deeper than it really is. Other really good techniques are deliberately having the substrate really steep at the back and then relatively shallow at the front. Again, this gives the optical illusion that the tank is really deep. And then kind of more obvious ones are using like a path and then having the pathway. So you get soil here, and then maybe some sand in the center. And then the sand could be quite wide path here. And then as it goes to the back of the tank, really thin, almost going to almost like a triangle effect. So there's almost no path at all, but the sand is getting gradually narrower and narrower as it goes up into the distance. And this creates again the optical illusion that there's this like really deep kind of vanishing point. Hopefully that will make sense to you. I don't think I've ever really done a dioramascape, and I've never used this perspective aquascaping so much. I'm much more of a classic nature aquarium kind of guy. But there's some great examples out there. So yeah, good luck with it. Okay, we've got another super chat. Axel, hi George, I noticed in some of your tanks you have CO2 and shrimps. Do you recommend high agitation in these tanks? Yeah, I tend to run quite high levels of surface agitation anyway, just to promote good oxygen levels. It's just a good practice in my experience for the whole aquarium system. So good oxygen obviously benefits the fish, the shrimp, and also the bacteria. And then you'll need to offset the amount of CO2 you add. The more surface agitation you have, the more CO2 you need to supply to get a decent level of CO2 in the aquarium. So yeah, I do, not just for the shrimp, but for the whole system, I deliberately run surface agitation. Thanks for the super chat. Omo Agi, thank you for the super chat. Planning on keeping shrimps and chili rasbora in a nano tank, 5 gallons with many plants and CO2. Any advice or deterrence? I think just like I said, just run some decent amount of surface agitation. Chili rasboras should keep the shrimp, shouldn't harm the shrimp. They're very small fish, so they can't really fit them in their mouths unless they're tiny shrimplets. So with many plants, which is great, it's going to be great for the fish and great for the shrimp, so no problems there. And if you're running CO2, just focus on good circulation. Make sure all those plants are really well fed. They're going to produce loads of oxygen. You're going to get good oxygen levels through the surface agitation as well. So you should be absolutely fine. Depending on what shrimp you want to keep and what your water parameters are, as a general rule of thumb, Neocaridina, so like your cherry shrimp, style shrimp, they prefer harder water. And then your Caridina, like your bee shrimp, they prefer softer water. So just bear that in mind. The more sensitive shrimp you keep, the kind of more close an eye you want to keep on your water parameters. I have very hard tap water. You know, the water in here is going to be particularly hard because I have Sirius stone in here or mini landscape rock, which produces extra hardness, and it'll boost the pH slightly. But these Neocaridina, I don't know if you can see the red cherry shrimp there just on the right hand rock, these actually prefer a little bit more harder, more mineral content in the water, so they're absolutely fine. Okay, going to do loads of questions, guys. I really apologise, I can't answer all of them in one go. Let's start from ones that just pop out at me. Christoph Prishka, George, what's your opinion on substrate additives? I think they are beneficial to the substrate system, but they're not essential. So if you're on a budget, then just stick with a good quality soil, which is what I do. I use Tropica aquarium soil the vast majority of the time, and I don't actually bother with any substrate additives. If I did, I'd probably just use some nutrition capsules. There's a lot of bacteria starters out there which come in like either Prodibio do them in a glass vial that you snap and it's like a liquid that you pour on the substrate, or you can get some powders These are all kind of to promote the bacteria colonization, which can be helpful. But in my experience, you know, I just use a good quality soil, plant heavily from the outset, and then everything, good water changes, and everything seems to work fine for me. Okay, tough take. Hi George, thanks for super chat. Chris, thank you for your answer on my Facebook question. When using both sand and soil, how would you go about keeping the two separate? I like the path. A real easy way is to use rocks. Actually, make the rocks as a part of the aquascape, but also use them as a barrier between the sand and the soil. That's what I do. It's probably the only way you can do it, unless you use kind of plastic inserts. But there's always going to be the chance of the soil migrating onto the sand. The soil is always a lot lighter. It's not as dense as the sand, so it tends to work its way onto the sand rather than the sand working its way onto the soil. So bear that in mind as well. But try to incorporate the rocks as part of your aquascape, and then also use those rocks simultaneously as a barrier. Hopefully that makes sense, mate. Thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. Shesti, I'm not sure how to say your name, but I'm going to try. Shesti Eyeball. I have set up a diorama aquarium. I'm 3 months in, really growing well, but having a bloom of green stringy type algae on the moss and plants. Advice, please. Green stringy algae is normally, it could be a lot of things. It could be poor plant growth altogether, but you're saying you've got everything growing well. So let's assume that your plant growth is fine. It could be as simple as too much light. So it depends on where this algae is forming. If it's excuse me, if it's higher up in the water column, higher up in the tank, nearer the light source, it could be too much light. So maybe consider dimming the lights if possible, or maybe using some floating plants. If it's 3 months in, it's kind of mature really. Your filter should be mature, your soil should be mature. It could be a nutrient issue. So you could actually kind of counterintuitively, you can get algae by not adding enough nutrients. So the plants are actually not growing to their potential, which leaves the door open for algae. So just make sure you're feeding enough nutrients via a liquid fertilizer. And just to treat it in the meantime, I would just manually remove as much of the algae as you can. Follow that up with a huge water change. Also, just consider the plants that are really infected with the algae. Just try to remove the complete leaf or trim away the moss that's got the algae attached. And then it's really important to siphon out that moss as you're trimming it with the algae attached. Then you're going to remove both the algae infested plant and the algae as well. So some tips there for you. Hopefully they can help you. Thanks for the super chat. I've got another super chat. Oh, this is coming in thick and fast, guys. I do appreciate it. Shezapan Varshal, I apologise if I've completely ruined your name. Hi George, how to set CO2 dosage in regards to lighting? Basically you need to test your CO2. So I would aim for 30 parts per million. You can either use a CO2 drop checker, which is an approximation, it's not really an accurate way. You can use a CO2 or a CO2 KH/pH chart, which you can find on the internet. So you need to test your water for pH and KH, then you cross-refer it to a table, which you can find on the web really easily, and then you can figure out your CO2 level there. Again, that's not a really accurate way. The way I like to do it, and I actually talk about this way in my book, is all you need is a good quality pH test kit. Test your water, test the water of your pH when there's no added CO2 in there at all. So maybe do it at the period of time when there's the least amount of CO2 in your tank, or maybe just after a big water change, or maybe just try to test the water when there's no added CO2. Make a note of that. Let's say we've tested this, there's no CO2 in here, we've tested it and it's 7.5, pH 7.5. Then test it again when it's got its maximum amount of CO2 in there. So the CO2 has been injected in there for a few hours. Test your pH then, and then make a note of that. Let's say we've injected CO2 in here for 4 hours. We test the pH, it's pH 6.5. If you remember, when it had no CO2, it's 7.5. When it's with CO2, it's 6.5. The difference there, which is 1.0. 1 the difference of pH 1 is 30 parts per million. And there's actually a table, I don't think I've ever actually seen it written down anywhere, but I've worked it out myself by using the internet basically. And I will make a video on this after my book's published. But basically the bigger the difference of that pH that you're testing for, the more CO2. But you want to be aiming for a pH difference of 1. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you stick with that 30 parts per million CO2, that should be suitable for any amount of light you have. It's at the upper end of what the fish and the shrimp will tolerate, 30 parts per million, and it's a good range for any plant to be able to use, even with high levels of lighting. The most important thing to consider when you do have, if you have high levels of lighting, especially in a new setup, is to plant really, really heavily, especially with some fast growers that are able to utilize this light rather than algae. So if you think about plants and algae always in competition with each other, the more plants you have, the healthier those are, the faster those plants are growing, basically the less algae you're going to get. So try not to be focused on actually hitting a specific CO2 level compared to the lighting. Try to hit 30 parts per million or 30 milligrams per litre as a stable level of CO2 throughout the whole photo period. And then you can, I would just adjust the lighting according to the needs of your plants. Hopefully that makes sense. And thanks for the super chat. Okay, those of you having a good old chat amongst yourselves on there, this is great to see. Oh, another super chat. Guys, you're keeping them on my feet, aren't you? Fantastic. Hi, George. Greetings from Canada. Hello. I have been using fluorite because it never breaks down. How long will Tropica soil last? It's a good question. You've got two considerations to how long it will last. How long it will last physically as a robust kind of substrate where it won't break down like you've said, like fluorite. Fluorite is basically posh gravel, which will never break down like you say. But soil, Tropica soil, will actually decompose very slowly over the few months or so. But the good news is that as long as you're given a good quality liquid fertilizer and you're not actually disturbing the soil too much, it will last years. What I like to do is feed the plants with a liquid fertilizer as well as through the soil. So the plants are getting nutrients through their leaves as well as through their roots. And the really interesting thing about Tropica soil is the more nutrients you give it through the leaves, the less kind of nutrients the plant is taking through its roots. So the longer the nutrient levels will last in the soil. And another great thing about the Tropica soil is it actually has the ability to take in any excess nutrients from the water, and it locks those nutrients into the soil, makes those nutrients available to the plant roots as well. So the nutrient content of the soil can potentially last almost indefinitely as long as you're using a good quality liquid fertilizer. And then you can expect the soil to kind of break down over 6 months or so, maybe longer. Depends on your water chemistry, depends on the plant growth, depends on if you're kind of messing around with the soil so much, depends on if you've got loads of shrimp and fish digging in it and things like this. So there's no kind of definite time span that I can give you. But just bear in mind that in my experience, you'll just get much better results with Tropica soil versus fluorite. You know, I've used fluorite before. It's a good product, but in my experience, it's not much better than regular gravel, maybe with some root capsules added. I would personally go, without a doubt, go for the Tropica soil. Okay, let's go back to some. another one from Mark Dorr. Thanks, Mark. And another one from Josh ATX. Thank you so much, guys. Mark Dorr, what are my favourite current aquascapes at the present time? Do you mean aquascapes or aquascapers? My current favourite aquascapes at home are my 1200. I think this is going to become one of them. I haven't done an Iwagumi in a while, so really, really happy with this. My favourite aquascapers have to be Takashi Amano, who sadly passed away, but currently I love Adam Pashkella's work. Awesome guy, really, he's a close friend in fact as well. Really, really good aquascaper. Josh Sim, world class. I really like, who else have I seen recently that I really love? Josh Sim, Dave Chow, love Dave's work, real inspiration to me in the early days. Yeah, so there's a few there for you, Mark. Josh ATX, please do a viewer submitted rate my scape video. That's a great idea. I have considered this a few times. I know Yuri's has done a scape critique as well. I think the challenge with that would be to the technology of actually showing you guys how I'm rating it. So if I do like a screenshot of their scape and put it on the video, and then move my mouse around or something. I'm not very good on Photoshop or anything like this. So I'll just have to think about the technology of actually how I would get the message across, you know, visually as a video of rating someone's scape. So something to think about. Thank you, Josh. This is a loaded question. What are the top 5 aquarium plants company? Well, I can only really speak for Europe because that's where I live and that's where I've got most experience from. I work very closely with Tropica, and in my opinion, they're the best quality plants that I've ever worked with. Denelay are very good as well. Also Aquaflora from the Netherlands, that's 3. We also have Aquafleur, which is part of the Aquadistry group, and then Aquadip. So these are all well-known European plant companies. And yeah, I don't really have much experience of American plant companies or Asian, so I can't really go into much more detail about that. Gemma Simmons Garland, hi George, any tips on scaping cube tanks? I seem to find it harder than rectangular tanks. PS, my 6-year-old asked me to tell you he loves your videos. First of all, thank you to your 6-year-old, I really appreciate it. I hope you're watching now and hope you can help your mum out with maintaining those aquascapes. Cube tanks, yeah, I think that a real simple way to start with a cube tank is assume that you're going to be viewing it from 3 sides. I think this is one of the great things about a cube tank. And then maybe an easy starting point is to start off with an island composition. So put your dominant hardscape right in the centre and then work your way out concentrically from the centre. This is a really kind of straightforward way to do it. It depends on the size of the cube as well. You know, if the smaller the cube, the kind of smaller the plant textures you want to use, obviously the smaller livestock you want to stock to give that sense of scale. If it's a really small tank, you know, consider using Tropica aquarium soil powder. This is going to give you a better sense of scale and better to plant those really fine delicate rooted plants like the Tropica ones who grow. But that would be a good starting point for you, Gemma. Thanks for the question. And shout out to your 6-year-old as well. Ginger Graves, hi Ginger, how are you doing? Good to see you. Thank you so much for the very generous super chat. Hi George, is there a difference between root tablets and root capsules? Is one better than the other? Thanks for these Q&As. Best wishes to you, Emma, and the kids for continued health. Pets, Tommy. Thank you, Ginger. Really appreciate that. And I know Emma and the kids and Tommy appreciate that too. Root tablets and root capsules. I would actually suggest root capsules. The reason for that is that usually in the capsule you have like a gelatin kind of sheath, and then inside that you have normally it's like an osmocote, which are special nutrient-rich balls. And these actually give the ability to add nutrients kind of right away. And there's normally a really good mix of different kind of nutrients in these capsules. The tablets tend to have like a lot of fillers, so they're not 100% full of nutrients. So, you know, you're not getting maybe as concentrated supply of nutrients in that one tablet versus the capsule. So yeah, just in terms of value, I would go for the capsules. Hopefully that answers your question. There are lots of different brands out there, but yeah, capsules in general, I would say would be my preference. Thanks for the super chat, Ginger. Appreciate it. Gemma, thank you, George. My son has a dwarf puffer cube that we've set it up together, hence the question. It's a great question. Oh, loads of questions. I don't know where to start. I've started already. Oh, we've got another super chat. Mean Machine 25, thank you so much. Hi George, I have Tetra Complete substrate with sand on top Also have TNC complete. I'm getting green algae and holes in plant leaves. Any advice, please? If you're getting holes in the plants, it sounds like it's a nutrient deficiency, although it could be. It's probably not snails. It's a common misconception that snails put holes in plants. Snails actually tend to eat decomposing matter. So if the plant's kind of dying off, then that's when it starts to eat it. I'd start by adding more TNC complete. If you're heavily planted, you've got good lighting, you're doing good maintenance, and you're still seeing holes in your plants, then it's probably a nutrient issue. So just add more. If there's a small risk, it could be a Marno shrimp. When a Marno shrimp get really hungry, they can start to eat plants, believe it or not. I've seen them eat Java fern before now. So if you've got a Marno shrimp in there and they're super hungry, it's unlikely in an established tank because they tend to eat fish food and obviously algae. They're not eating the green algae here, so it's probably not a Marno shrimp. So yeah, holes in plant leaves, it depends on the species as well. If they're start off with adding more TNC complete. I don't know if you're using CO2 injection. If you are, just keep an eye on your CO2 levels as well. Keep an eye on good circulation levels as well. This is going to help. But yeah, definitely the first thing I'd do is add more fertilizer. Okay, this is a good question from James Dyer. I've lost it. Oh, here we go. How do I get algae off silicone? I've tried everything. It's really tough to get algae off silicone. It kind of stains it basically, especially clear silicone obviously. Now what I have done, I'm going to give you a top tip for cleaning any mold or anything silicone in your showers or baths. You know, you have that white silicone that normally runs in your bathroom. Now sometimes you can get mold building up on that, and what you can do is actually get some toilet paper, roll it into like a sausage shape, and then completely soak it in bleach. Wear rubber gloves, obviously, well ventilated, have windows open, but basically get this bleach covered saturated bit of toilet roll in a sausage and wedge it in the corner. Obviously you're going to have to do this in an empty tank with no livestock in, of course. So you know, if you're easy opportunity, you know, if your tank's empty, this is the only time you can really do it. But get your bleach sausage of toilet roll and then wedge it into the corners of the silicone, and then just press it in as much as you can, obviously wearing your rubber gloves, and leave it there for 24 hours. That bleach is going to soak into the silicone, and when you peel that toilet roll away, you're going to have sparkling clean silicone. So there you go, top tip. Yeah, thanks for all the questions, guys, and I know I can't answer all your questions, but please feel free. If there's any experienced guys on the chat, then please feel free to jump in and answer questions for the community. This is a community hangout. It's you know, obviously I'm talking to you guys, but talk amongst yourselves as well. It's just a really great place to hang out and spread some aquascaping positivity in this time that we're going through right now. Okay, this is a great question from New Mexico Aquatic. Shout out to my friend Little Bobby. How you doing, mate? I don't ever hear you discuss nitrate levels. Do you have a ppm that you recommend for nitrates? Now, the reason I don't discuss nitrate levels is because I don't actually worry about them. I don't know what my nitrate levels are in my aquariums. I don't know what it is out of my tap, because the system, the kind of methodology that I promote relies on good, healthy plant growth, dosing regularly with a good quality liquid fertilizer that contains nitrates, but then changing plenty of water every week at least to dilute any nitrates that have built up. So the great thing about a heavily planted aquarium and a healthy planted aquarium is that it doesn't really matter what the nitrate levels are, as long as there's enough of them. And that's why I deliberately almost overdose every day a little bit too much of liquid fertilizer, because I know the plants can handle it, and basically the healthier the plants are, the better you're looking after those plants, the less algae you get. So that's the reason I don't talk about nitrates, is because I never test for them. I don't know what they are. If I had to pick a number, and I'm reluctant to do this because I don't want people going home and testing their tanks for nitrate and trying to hit this certain level. But I would go for about 10 parts, 20 parts per million at least nitrate. But it's also important to think about other nutrients as well. So don't just try to get laser focused on one nutrient level like nitrate. You need to consider phosphates, potassium, iron, all the other trace elements, magnesium, calcium, etc. But I deliberately very rarely talk about hitting specific nutrient levels because it's not necessary. We have access to very high quality liquid fertilizers now, all in one liquid fertilizers like Tropica Specialized, TNC Complete, the Aquascape Complete Liquid Fertilizer, Thrive. All these contain a good ratio, a good recipe of all the nutrients, hopefully in an ideal kind of ratio, that if you dose enough of that every day, it ensures your plants never go hungry. If your plants don't go hungry, they grow really well. If they grow really well, you don't get algae, and if they grow really well, they produce lots of oxygen and they keep your fish healthy. So this is why I very, very rarely test my water for anything apart from temperature and maybe pH, maybe ammonia in initial stages when I'm using a soil substrate as well. So a long answer to that question, but hopefully everyone finds it useful. JH Aquatics, how you doing, mate? Good to see you. Hi, Aaron. Hi, George. What do you prefer, tap water over RO water? Why do I prefer tap water over RO water? Any specific reasons? Yes, just ease of use and expense and less waste. So tap water it comes out of my tap. It's not free because I have to pay the water board for a specific amount, but in terms of reverse osmosis water, it's a lot less expensive, a lot less hassle. I don't have to test with reverse osmosis water, you need to add remineralizing powders, etc., which can be expensive, more time consuming. So in terms of, the potential marginal better quality water you have with RO, you might get tiny better quality plant growth. You might be able to keep more sensitive fish and shrimp, etc. But I would just rather keep fish and plants and shrimp that I know would thrive in my tap water and build a system around that rather than specifically going down the reverse osmosis route and then choosing things to suit that. It's just much easier for me just using tap water. Daniel Rodriguez, this is a good question. On the Tropica 90-day app, it says you can add shrimp and snails to the aquarium on the 3rd day of setup. I wonder if this is true because I find it really weird. What's your opinion on it? I would agree with that. I always add my shrimp very soon after setup, but I do ensure that the water is not, we talked about ammonia with soils. You do need to do these big water changes every day in the first week or so with a soil setup. If you're using regular gravel or sand with a nutrient-rich base layer, then you're not going to get not very likely to get ammonia. But with the Tropica 90 days app, it's assuming that you're planting heavily. So actually, those plants are going to use any nitrogen, any ammonia, etc. So that's why you can put your shrimp and snails in right at the early stages. And actually, this acts as a preventative measure for algae rather than a corrective measure. So with algae, you always want to be preventing issues from occurring before they occur. Once you get algae issues, it's almost too late, and it can be quite challenging to get rid of that algae. It's actually much easier to prevent the algae from occurring in the first place, and we do that by adding the algae crew towards the beginning of the aquascape's life. Wayne Drayton, liquid CO2, yeah, it will nay. Not a big fan of liquid CO2. It's actually not liquid CO2 at all. It's a marketing gimmick. There's no CO2 in liquid CO2. It's sometimes called liquid carbon. The active ingredient is glutaraldehyde, which is actually a biocide used to disinfect surgical instruments, etc. But it's in a very low dose in liquid carbon products, so it doesn't actually potentially harm your livestock. But it is still a biocide. It's actually a very effective algae side, so you can use it to spot those like batbeard algae in particular. It's very popular for, but I'm not a big fan of it just because it's a nasty chemical basically. Myth busting with George, yay! should do a video, shouldn't I? 10 most popular myths busted. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap it up in 5 or 10 minutes or so. My voice is starting to go already. Oliver Hansen, is a twin star 600 SA enough for a 70 by 50 by 40 tank? I assume you mean centimeters. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, it's a good light. You should be able to grow most plants with that, especially with CO2 injection, etc. You might struggle with really, like if you want to grow super red stem plants or really tight dense carpet of something, but with most plants it should be fine. So many comments to go through, guys. I'm really, it's hard to pick out any. I'm a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. 310 of you watching. Wow, it's amazing. Thank you. Okay, I'm probably gonna wrap it up because there's so many questions. Oh, we've got a quick super chat. Thank you, David Scapes, for the £1 super chat. I apologise for not being able to answer all your questions. Thank you so much for all the super chats. It's really appreciated. I don't ask for money, but it is just a nice way that I can give you an answer to your question, and it does help support the channel as well. You know, with this current pandemic, you know, my income has suffered slightly. I can't do workshops, I can't do private installations, I can't travel anywhere to do any of my work, so all my income has to come from working from home, and that has an impact. So I'm not asking for super chats now. I'm just saying it's a great way to support the channel, and if you will definitely want your question answered, then bear that in mind for future live streams. So I appreciate them, and I appreciate a lot of people their income's been hit hard, so I wouldn't expect super chats from anyone. I'd never take it for granted anyway. So just a kind of an update of my week here. Aquascape 1200 is looking really good. It's looking really overgrown, so I'm a bit, I don't know what to do with it. I took a contest kind of level photo, so I've kind of got that in the bank, and if I want to enter it into some contests, like I can. So if I kind of mess it up now, I'm kind of safe. But I'm kind of thinking, do I rescape it completely? Just do I trim the plants black and wait for them to grow again? So I kind of recycle everything. I definitely want to do something with the foreground carpet, but whatever I do, I'll keep you guys updated with a video, of course. Happy to see this one, guys. If you've not seen the setup video of this yet, check it out on the Awaze UK YouTube channel, and also on my channel. It's the latest video that I uploaded on this tank. The Fluval Flex is doing really well. No CO2 in there, standard lighting, but all the plants are growing great in there. I have a new aquarium, which is just a plant holding tank right now, but that's going to be set up as a wood-based layout. And then we talked about it last week. I'm going to potentially do a biotope series in the style line 125. And the cichlid tank is just the cichlid tank, looking great. Fish are growing really big and healthy and colourful. So that's kind of my kind of aquascapes at home right now. Still working on the book, which is getting there. Its release date is planned for November, so I'll keep you updated on the progress of that. Hopefully still planning a kind of world tour, hopefully get to meet some of you guys in the flesh and maybe do some book signing and aquascaping workshops, etc. That'd be really, really cool. Can't wait to hopefully do that probably early next year now. Apart from that, we're all healthy and happy. The wife and kids are doing well. We're all still on lockdown here. Really trying to keep to a routine, trying to stay fit and healthy, doing exercises in the garden, taking the dog for a walk, going for an occasional run, really focusing on well-being, you know, trying to exercise self-care. You know, when you're self-employed, and especially as a content creator who relies on social media for their business, you have to take time out and you know, like I say, exercise some self-care. So I've tried to do that as well. And for anyone that's watching that is struggling, you know, kind of during this time, then please, you know, all I can say is aquascaping, for me anyway, has been a perfect remedy, a perfect therapy in times of stress and anxiety. And, you know, I try to make this point every time I go online, is try to use aquascaping, you know, for that therapeutic value that it can give you. Share it as well. You know, we have access to Instagram, Facebook, etc., where you can share all your work and help generate communities, become part of a community. If you're living at home alone, then these online communities can be a really great way to engage with other people, help you feel like a common purpose, a common value, which can, you know, really give you a sense of purpose and enjoyment. And yeah, hopefully you guys aren't suffering too much. I'm rambling again, which is kind of what I do best, isn't it? Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for the super chats. Thanks again for all the questions. Hopefully I'll see you again this time next week. Have a great week. Stay healthy, stay happy, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, etc. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Keep on scaping. Cheerio.